Hello, Half-Pint Finn here. Today, I'm going to show you how I make the bases on all of my Nurgle units. Let's get started. But first, it's time for today's tiny tip. But don't worry, this actually has to do with something we'll be doing later in the video. See, when I'm painting all of those nasty spots, such as these boils and blisters, I like to use a bit of Nurgle's rot to create a glaze of shine. This effect works well with larger blemishes, so I tend to focus on those first. Nurgle's rot is great when you have an undercoat of green or yellow, and if you want the color to show more, you could probably apply it less liberally than I did here. When I do an undercoat of red, however, I tend to use blood for the blood god. So, to start off, I've pre-painted this Poxwalker off of camera, and he is in desperate need of a base. So, for that, we're going to need some supplies. Today, I've bought some cork, some cat litter, preferably unused, though, this is Nurgle, some coarse sand, and some baby powder. Before we start placing anything, I'm just going to look at the miniature and kind of assess where I'm able to place the larger debris. Normally I'd place these in spots the miniature's feet are furthest from, as a way to balance out the whole piece. After those are placed, we're going to spread glue around the base in a semi-random pattern. It's really important though to not completely cover the base in glue yet, since we want to create high points and low points. I tend to focus around the areas the bigger rocks are located, since when we place the larger grains of sand, it will create the appearance that these bigger rocks are falling apart. And just using an old brush, I'm just going to kind of brush off the debris that's attached itself to the actual miniature. Now, we're going to be using some PVA glue, but we're going to be separating this into two steps. The first step, we're going to be using PVA straight from the bottle, or rather, not watered down. This will create texture on top of what we've already placed and make some higher points and low points. And almost immediately after doing step 1, we'll move on to step 2, which is to cover the entire surface of the base with watered down PVA. This will get into all of those nooks and crannies and seal everything in, and after we've dipped it in the baby powder a second time, the whole base will look completely seamless. And finally, we can move on to painting. Now I'm going to start with a base coat of black, and you'll notice here that I'm not all too worried about hitting the feet of the miniature with my paintbrush while I'm doing this. In fact, I actually kind of want that. See, what's going to happen is when we build up those layers throughout the entire painting process of this base, it'll kind of create an effect that the miniature has been walking through this base for days and days and days, sort of tying in the miniature with the base and the base with the miniature, making it all look like one complete piece, rather than just the base and the miniature looking completely separate. And in the next step, we're going to pick out those big rocks, and we're going to cover them in a layer of dark gray. Now, with the same dark gray that we used to paint those rocks, we're going to do a dry brushing over the entirety of the base. Now we're going to do a dry brushing of white, and we're going to make sure to apply it lighter than we did last time with the dark gray. For this I prefer an off-white, but you can really use whatever white you want. Now, like I said earlier, I'm going to be making sure to hit the feet of the miniature, and especially the bottom of the feet where most of the dirt would be attached to. And that is looking pretty good to me. Now, after letting it dry for just a little bit, we're going to apply a black wash. And for that, I'm going to be using a homemade black wash that I made out of water, black paint, and black ink. And the last step before we move on to the sludge, we're going to be reapplying that dry brushing of white. This will help pick up all of those highlights that were muted during the wash. And finally, it's time for the
Sludge.
And the first color we're going to be using is a warboss green, or any sort of similar green that you have. And we're going to find the lowest parts, the most recessed parts on the base, and we're going to be creating little puddles everywhere. And you knew it was coming. Next we're going to be doing 2 coats of Nurgle's rot. And finally, to finish it off, we're going to be base coating the rim with Abaddon Black. And I am pretty happy with the result. I mean, look at those bubbles. Those are some nice bubbles. But that's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see more of my videos in the future. Happy painting!